Yeah, thanks everyone. Happy Friday. We appreciate you joining Jess's webinar series. Today we're going to be going over inbound receiving and returns. Before I hand things over to Joe, we're going to be going through our order download and appointment screens, right, as well as some of the receiving options within JASCI. Typical receiving options like PO receiving, ASM receiving, as well as some container and returns receiving. Throughout the webinar, if you guys have questions, I'll be monitoring the Q&A chat. Feel free to put them in there. Okay. So, Joe, without further ado, I'll hand things over to you.
Cool. Yep. All right. Thanks everybody for joining. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll go right into the software. Okay, great. Is that showing?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Perfect. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Today's webinar is all about inbound processes. So our last webinar was on system navigation, and learning a little bit more about the different uses of the software on the mobile device and the full screen. Today, we're actually going to be diving into some of our workflows and also some of the screens we have that you would typically use in regards to inbound processes like receiving purchase orders, receiving ASNs or containers, inbound appointments. Let's go ahead and get started by talking about the very first thing when it comes to inbound is that data that we're going to be receiving against, data of what we're expecting to receive into the warehouse. So JASCI has a order download for purchase orders. We have order downloads for ASNs, for RMAs or return authorizations. We can also do inbound shipments. Those can either be interfaced into JASCI to tie several purchase orders together to make it easier to receive when that container arrives. Or you can actually generate those inbound shipments within JASCI once you have the purchase orders downloaded from the host. We also have screens where you can create um, POs or ASNs or inbound shipments. So you could do all of this through the front end as well. However, the most common methodology of getting your purchase orders, ASNs, returns, etc., into JASCI is via an integration. That's typically going to be done through API. However, we also have alternative methods for integrating data into JASCI, whether it's inbound or outbound. We also have a data upload program where you can load an Excel file to JASCI, and that can include multiple purchase orders, ASNs, etc. So first things that I want to talk about is the different types of data that we can integrate in or get into JASCI and then receive against. So we have receiving against purchase orders. We have receiving against ASNs. We have something called blind receiving, which is a receiving method that you would use if you don't have that data ahead of time and you want to go ahead and get the goods in the door. I'm not going to be doing an example of that today, but it's very similar to the rest of our receiving processes, but it's not doing any verification against an order or for certain SKUs. We also have something called container receiving, which is for our inbound shipments of several purchase orders lumped together under one number. And it makes it easy to receive when you have several POs in a container. Rather than having to go and input all those POs, you just put in the inbound shipment number and begin receiving the products across all the POs tied to it. So we're going to show a few examples of that today. Before we get into the actual receiving flows, I did want to talk about another piece of our inbound processes that is used by our customers, which is our doc appointments. So the doc appointments are going to be appointments that you can set up in the system, and it's basically a calendar where you can see what's expected at which dock door and at what time. You can also see more information on the meetings, and to create them is very simple. You would just click here and hit new appointment, and then you can declare how long you expect the drop off to be there or pickup, because this is for both inbound and outbound that you can use this calendar. You can also declare the carrier that you're expecting to see. Let's just put an example in here. Let's say it's arriving at 12:30 and it's going to be here until for about 2 hours total. All right. You can also put in the freight type if you're going to require an audit. use types, the number of pallets you're expecting, number of cases, if you have any special equipment required, or if it's temperature controlled. These are all data points that you can use to help understand how you'd like to staff your inbound group, who's going to be working on what trucks, how many people you need, etc. So JASCI has this calendar system where you can mark appointments as arrived. You can see this one that's pink. I marked that as arrived earlier. And then as they go by, as the day goes by, you'll see them either get marked as arrived or marked as late. And you can set the preferences for all of that here with this preference button. So this is a built-in calendar system that JASCI has where you can set up and view appointments, whether they're inbound or outbound, and you have a full calendar to be able to set that up for weeks in advance or days in advance. We also have a mobile flow to mark appointments as arrived if you did want to staff somebody out there at the yard or gate check, and they can mark these appointments as arrived, or even change the door that you want them to go to. So that's a little bit about our inbound appointments, and we also have outbound appointments. But since this webinar is focused on inbound, we'll just stay talking about that. These can include your purchase orders, your ASNs, things that you plan to receive. But we do want that data in there as well. As I mentioned, you want to have that integrated data or created data. We even have built-in screens where you can go in and you can create a purchase order. We'll just call this webinar test. And now I'm able to declare, okay, what products do I want on this PO and how many of each SKU. So what we could do is we can add that. And when we update, what this is going to do is actually create a PO for us, however we wanted to label it. And it's going to give it an open status. It's going to give it our products on there, and how many. And we can actually go and look up this work within JASCI now. So just that simply, we created a PO to receive against. Um, we also have screens for creating your inbound shipments, for creating your ASNs. So those are all going to be under here. For example, our inbound shipment menu option. If we were to look at one of our, we can either hit new or we can do display all open. I actually created one today for this webinar, so we can take a look at that by clicking edit. And here you can see multiple purchase orders that we've downloaded into JASCI are now stored under this shipment ID called inbound webinar. And on our container receiving, we can just simply scan this inbound webinar shipment ID, and we aren't going to have to be entering in these purchase orders. We just start receiving the lines that are on those purchase orders and the products that are on them, and it'll align the receipts that you do. Um, so let's go ahead and dive into one of these workflows. If you notice on the mobile device on the right-hand side, I have a inbound menu profile, and under my receiving, I have a few different methods here. We're going to go to our PO receiving demo just to start this off. We're going to receive against a purchase order. Now on the full screen, I'm going to go into my lookup for, we call it open receiving, and that's going to be showing us our work type PO receiving in an open status. And you can see I have a lot of them that I downloaded a long time ago. We can just go into one of these as an example, and we'll go ahead and start receiving products that we see on it. So this one right here, you can see that it's got one product. There's 23 of them, and it's in an open status. We don't have any quantity processed, so we'll be able to fully receive this. So if we scan our purchase order in our receiving PO demo, this is then going to move us on to the next step where we're scanning the products that are expected on it. Now, as you're doing receiving flows, if you're scanning a ASN, or if, and with ASNs, we'll talk about the difference between detail capture and traditional ASN. But if it's an ASN, a PO, an inbound shipment, return, what it's going to be doing is knowing that main number of the purchase order or the ASN or the return, and it's going to know which SKUs that we're expecting to receive against it. So if I come here and I try to enter in a product that we're not expecting, it's going to say product not needed. If I enter in a SKU that doesn't exist, it's going to tell us invalid product. So we're going to have error messages that help the user if they try to receive something that's not supposed to be received. It's going to let them know why. So let's go ahead and enter in our 0653. And as we scan that, it's going to move us to our next step because that's the product that we are expecting. And it's asking us how many we'd like to receive. So this is going to be both our quantity and our unit of measure. So we can receive as eaches, we can receive as cases, or we could receive full pallets. And you can declare how many per case, how many cases on the pallet, and how many total pallets arrived. So we're keeping the math simple for the operators and still respecting that quantity unit of measure. Now, also, based on the unit of measure we select, is also going to influence where we slot these goods or items to be put away to. And that comes into our slotting logic, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit here. We're also going to do a webinar in the future on our slotting capabilities. Let's just go ahead and enter in a sample quantity here that we'd like to receive. So I'll just say it's a pallet with two cases on it and just two per pallet. That way I can go back and I can receive more against this PO for future webinars and demos. And then we hit this receive button. So when we hit receive, you'll see it says processing in the top. And what it's doing is actually looking at our locations, looking at our inventory levels, looking at what we entered during the receiving process, looking at our slotting logic, and it's figuring out the best possible place that we're going to be storing this inventory in. It's also printing out a put away label in that time, which you can link up to workbenches and link yourself to a particular printer so that when you do your receipt, it prints out a put away label, you slap it on there, and it'll have a license plate number for someone else to go and put away. Now, if we go and look at our open putaways, and we're going to have a webinar in the future on the putaway processes. But if we look at, I have a lot of open putaways, by the way, but if we look at today, we can see that we just did some receiving. Um, and this one right here, this 18992, it's slotted to zone 600, which is where I store my pallets. And if we wanted to see exactly where this put away got sent to, we could see our license plate number there, our work zone, the PO that it came from. We can actually see up here the work control number. That's actually that task identifier for the PO that we received against if we wanted to go and look up that work again. We can also see the last activity and team member and time, which was the receiving and slotting by me that created this put away work. We could see it down to the second of when that occurred. And then we can also see the line level detail. So we could see the SKU, where it is currently, the area, and where it's going to, the specific location. If we wanted to see more information about what we had received, maybe if there's lots, maybe serialization or expiry, we have all sorts of inventory control. We can see that information as well, which will also carry over to the inventory record when we put it away. So that's what our receiving flows are doing is you're entering what you're receiving against, you're entering what you're receiving, and then based on what you've entered of what you've received, the system is going to automatically figure out where we want to put these goods away to. Now, you'll notice down below I have a button called damaged on the mobile device. So if we had noticed damage during the receiving process, we can click this button called damage, and it's going to say, okay, let's go ahead and open the camera on your device. If you don't have a camera on your device, you can see here, it'll actually open up your file to be able to attach an image. Let's say you have a digital camera or something, and you're doing your receiving for damage from a desktop. You'd be able to upload that image from just any file on your computer. But if your device has a camera on it, you'll be able to click the camera button and actually associate a picture with that receiving work that you're doing. All right, so we're going to go out of this workflow now. We're going to talk about a little bit more about some of our other inbound receiving flows. I showed you an example there of receiving against a purchase order and receiving a full pallet. And then also, when we created that receipt, it then generated a put away work for us based on the slotting logic that we have. Now, slotting is going to be based on a few different things in the system. It's going to be considering your current inventory levels first and foremost, and it's also going to be considering the product DIMs versus the location DIMs. But there's a lot more that goes into which products go where. And that's why I'm going to quickly go to a screen that we have called product maintenance. This is basically a reflection of the product table. So if we were to look up a certain SKU or just to create a new SKU, we could see all of the different fields that go into a product that could be filled with different values. Like, is it a lot controlled item? Yes or no? Is it an expiry item? Yes or no? Do we want to store that FIFO, LIFO, FIFO, or even first manufacturer? First out, that's more about the allocation process, which we'll talk about in a webinar down the road. But you can also choose one of the main features that's going to be used here is either your product ABC codes if you're going to be slotting based on product velocity. And then we also have down here product slotting category. Now I've created some sample categories for a demonstration I did previously for a cold storage and pharmaceutical company where you could see the different slotting categories that are created. But you have full control over which slotting categories you choose. And then you can link these slotting categories to a particular profile or group of locations. And you can see that in our location profile maintenance. If we were to go to a location profile, I'll just hit new to show you what this screen looks like. We can actually choose if we're going to be slotting to these locations or not. And if we are slotting, which product categories, you could see those same options that I have here. Which ones do we want to have slotting to this group of locations? So a location profile is a group of locations that you have similar traits to, whether it's the same size or the same slotting categories, or maybe it's, the same allocation rules that you have within there. Your slotting for received inventory is going to be largely factored on your product, your location, and your current inventory levels. Of course, it's also going to be ensuring that we can fit those items in the location by using the dimensional data of both the products and the locations. All right, so now we're going to show another example of receiving. If we go back here and we do I'm actually going to go to one of our screens called a work lookup. And if we wanted to find a particular ASN or if we wanted to find a particular sales order or license plate number, or maybe we know the work control number, we can actually search it on our work lookups. I think I might have mentioned this on a previous webinar. If not, it will be on one of our webinars about lookups and reports. But you can also search by a work type and status combination. So if we went to ASN receiving in an open status and searched that, we can see that we have a whole bunch of ASNs that we're able to receive against. I have one that's created a little bit more recently. I'll go to that one. And here we can see I created this ASN for the webinar today. I actually called that ASN webinar. And we can see the detail levels. We can see the line or lines that I have on it. We can see the work control number. So this is what we're going to want to receive against in the ASN receiving. Now, I want to talk about ASN receiving a little bit because with JASCI, our customer base has had kind of mixed opinions on what they'd like to have happen during the ASN receiving process. We have some that do a traditional ASN receiving, meaning that they're just simply scanning the ASN because it's a trusted supplier, and they're not worried about the detail capture of making sure they have the proper quantity or SKUs according to that ASN. This is a process that's commonly used when you know you have a high enough rating with that supplier to where you can trust their accuracy, and you just simply scan the ASN. So if we go into our ASN receiving, and this is actually asking us for a workbench. A workbench is a way that we can sign into a printer within our various workflows. For the sake of receiving, it's to create your put away labels. So we're going to sign into that workbench, and then it's going to ask us to scan a ASN. So we're going to scan this ASN, and this is going to bring us to basically complete that ASN. As you can see here, it just says receiving done. It's not asking us to enter product details or quantity and unit of measure. It's not asking us to confirm lots or anything like that. It's just one simple scan to do your receipt and then creating the put away based on that ASN that you just received. All right, so we can see here that it's now in a completed status. As I've refreshed that screen, we can see the quantity required and quantity processed. You can see the last activity task and time and team member was me. So that's an example of ASN receiving. Now, the reason I was talking about the different types of ASN receiving is because some like to do a ASN receiving details. The ASN receiving details is going to be very similar to what I just showed on PO receiving, where we're doing detail capture. So we're entering the product, the quantity, the unit of measure, and any product attributes that we want to confirm. This would be to be able to do all those same steps, but instead of using a purchase order data point, we're just using an ASN data point that was integrated. So maybe you're not sending purchase orders to to JASCI, you're sending ASNs, but you still want that detail capture. You can do the ASN receiving details. Traditionally, ASN receiving without detail capture is kind of the point of ASN receiving, but some like to have that additional verification on the inbound to make sure they have the right goods and the right quantities. So next we're going to talk about the inbound shipments for your container receiving. So we actually have a full screen lookup on the inbound shipment where we can go and we can view, as I showed earlier, we have an inbound shipment that you could see add purchase orders to. You can also interface this data and list the POs on there, but this is a real easy screen to use within JASCI where you can declare the date that you're expecting it, the time that you're expecting it, if you want to give pallet and case counts to it to have be more helpful with information, or to even give it, description so you can see what's expected for and on what day. But here we can add more POs if we wanted to and save and update. We can also add notes to this inbound shipment, like maybe the container got caught, on a boat somewhere and it's stuck at a port, and you're going to be waiting for a while for it. You could go in and throw a note in there. But it knows that these three purchase orders, I'll do a lookup on one of them specifically, like the 2238, the wing nuts. We're no longer going to have to scan this purchase order to receive against it. We can simply go into our container receiving, scan that inbound shipment number, and then start scanning our products like the wing nuts or any of the other products that are on there. And we'll show you an example of that. We'll exit this workflow, and we're going to go into our container receive workflow. And again, it's going to ask us for our workbench. This is pretty standard in our receiving workflows, where you're going to associate yourself with a label printer. And now it's asking us for our shipment ID. So we're going to come back here and we're just going to enter that in, whether it's a scan or you type it, or you're doing like me where I copy and paste. And we'll scan our shipment ID. Now it's going right to that barcode verification, or sorry, the barcode scan. So we're going to scan one of our products here. Um, and then that's going to bring us through the receiving the quantity and unit of measure. So we could do the same concept here if we wanted to receive, cases. We could say, hey, let's go ahead and receive 2 cases and hit this receive button. And it's going to go through that same process. It's going to say, okay, let's figure out where we're going to store these goods, and then also print the put away labels. So both those cases just slotted. And if we go to our open putaways, we'll be able to see that as well. If we go to our putaways from today, and we can see the 2 lines here. These are both the cases that are going to be put away. Now, we'll have a put away webinar coming up where we talk about different put away processes. For example, if you knew both these cases were either going to the same location or going near each other in a certain aisle, maybe you want to do those as a cluster put away, and you could put away multiple things at once. Again, we'll dive into that in our put away webinar, but we have various ways that you can group these LPNs of put aways together and make your put away process very, very simple. So if we wanted to see exactly where this case got slotted to, it was in zone 100, which is where I store cases. And we could see the exact location that it wants me to put there. So that's an example of our receiving cases. Now we also have return receiving. So if we were to go and look at the last data point that I want to talk about today, which is our returns, I'm going to go back to that work lookup and I'm going to go and find my returns that are in an open status. And now if we come here, we can see that I actually have 5 in an open status that I downloaded a long time ago. I've been chipping away at these. And we can go into one of these and click detail, and we can see the items that are expected on it. So if we were to go into our return receiving flow, go to inbound, then returns, you'll then, again, our workbench so that we can have our labels print out. And we can now either scan the sales order or enter the sales order associated with it, or the RMA number. The RMA number is something that's typically integrated from the host system or from a returns management system where we have an RMA number. But often you'll want to associate that RMA with a sales order because as the product comes back in, it might not have a label that says that RMA number. It might just have that sales order number somewhere on it. And that'll be an easier way to process your return is by entering that sales order number, which is why we have this order lookup button. But since I know the RMA that I'm planning to receive, I'm just going to go ahead and enter this RMA here. And it's going to bring us on to our next step. Again, it's going to be doing product verification. So if we scan something that's not expected, it's going to tell us that. And then if we scan something that is expected, it's going to bring us on to the next step where we then can say, okay, how many of these are we receiving? Right now, I'm receiving eaches. So if I say that I'm receiving two, you'll see it actually says exceeds the quantity. So we know we're expecting one of them, so it's not going to allow me to over receive on this return. And we have that rule built into all of our receiving flows, but if you want to allow for over receiving, we have settings for that, whether it's just any amount that you want to, or maybe it's based on a percentage of the line level quantity that you want to allow for over receiving. So let's go ahead and enter one, but you'll also see this button down here called reason. Now, as I click this, and I apologize for the small drop down here, I'm simulating a mobile device through Chrome. Typically, this is a much larger drop down, but you can actually choose the type of reason that you want to put in there, whether it's damage reasons or something that it needs a further inspection before it goes back into inventory, or maybe you want it to go straight into inventory and you don't choose a reason code. But this reason code is going to allow us to then influence where we slot this product to so it doesn't go straight back into inventory. So if I hit update here on this, it received the one, it's going to go ahead and process that and move us on to receive more products on this return. And if we were to go look at that put away that we just created, if we go to our open putaways, we can now see that because we chose that damage code, I think I have called discard, and if we look at the details here, you're going to see that it slotted it to the damage area and location instead of slotting it into our inventory because maybe we want to have someone take a look at this and see if it's okay to put back into inventory. And that's part of your reason codes, whether you're just doing normal receiving and you want to have a reason code influence where you direct the goods to go and kind of bypass the slotting, or maybe it's for damage that you've observed, or maybe it's for returns and you have different processes for your returned inventory. So that kind of brings us to the end of what I wanted to show today. We talked about receiving inbound order download. We talked about our appointment calendar. We talked about different receiving methods like POs, ASNs, containers or inbound shipments, and then also returns. We also have blind receiving, which I didn't show, but is a very basic process in JASCI. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or feel free to reach out to JASCI and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have on these webinars or on these inbound processes. And that's all we have for today. So James, I'll pass it back to you and
Thanks, Joe. I
close this
appreciate
out.
the time you spent there. I'll give everyone 10, 20 seconds here to put anything in the chat. And if not, everyone enjoy the weekend and we'll hopefully speak soon.